Today we are joined by Mr. Vimlendu Jha, an environmentalist, a social entrepreneur, and the founder of Sweccha, a youth-led organization in Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Yes.
So my first question is, what is AQI? Because I feel like some of us don't understand it. We see it as a number on our apps and on Instagram stories. So what is AQI?
So first we need to understand what is air quality, and what is air quality index. So air quality index, largely your question, is a parameter to understand what is the quality of our air, how polluted the air is. Scientifically speaking, that there are various parameters on which air quality is actually measured. So we're talking about particulate matter 2.5, which is very, very tiny, which is almost 30 to 40 times smaller than human hair. And that is primarily coming from the vehicles in that sense. And then there's PM10, which is large particulate matter, which is largely dust that we're talking about. Then there's ozone, there's nitrogen, there's carbon monoxide. So various, almost 6 factors together, the composite of it creates this number called air quality index. Of course, as in many other countries, the parameter is more stringent, where they even measure PM.5 or PM1. In India, we only measure PM2.5, PM10, and some of these carbon monoxide, nitrogen, and sulfur in that sense. And largely, this is an indicator to tell you how polluted the air is. And also, these numbers are not just numbers in the sense. It also, in a way, prompts certain reaction or certain advisory, both for individuals. At the end of the day, when you know the air quality is 400 or 500 or for that matter 800, how are you supposed to behave? Or are there activities that you could voluntarily reject or not engage in? Something which is, say for example, if there's a recreational activity, you want to go and run in a park or want to really step out of the house, non-essential things that can be avoided because the public health advisory, which is triggered by this number, helps you to make that decision. And also in terms of the government, at the end of the day, those numbers helps the government in policy formulation, also to understand how polluted the air is, what are the sources of pollution, which gas. So for example, when we know that on a particular day, PM2.5 is higher and PM10 is not that bad in a particular area, then you know that it's actually coming from construction. So if PM10 is high, then you know that it's coming from construction and demolition activities or from dust, for that matter. Or if there's a coal thermal power plant around and your sulfur dioxide readings are higher, then you know that that coal thermal power plant is not really managing its emission standards.
Which app can we trust for AQI?
Well, these days I say trust not a machine, trust your lung and your throat and your eyes. That's an indicator enough. These days you don't really need a machine to tell you how polluted the air is. Every household has a nebulizer, has a breathing disorder, your eyes are watery. But of course, in terms of measurement, government monitors, I would say it's very difficult to trust. I've myself witnessed the air quality monitors in various areas sprinkled with water in its surrounding. We've seen air quality monitors actually being turned off during peak pollution times. Therefore, no option but to actually trust the private air quality monitors. That actually shows you that air quality, as in the government's monitor today, this morning, says it's 402, and my personal private monitor was actually showing me 480 to 490 in relatively greener area.
So why does AQI get worse in winter?
So actually, a lot of times we think of air pollution or air quality crisis only as a seasonal crisis, because in winter months, it's actually visible. So we're sitting right now, imagine it's foggy / smoggy, and therefore pollution gets visible because of geographical, meteorological reasons, in terms of wind speed decreasing, in terms of temperature dipping, and so on and so forth. But reality be told that air quality in the entire Delhi NCR region through the year is either poor, very poor, severe, or hazardous in that sense. Only in the winter months, it actually crosses that threshold. So-called threshold that the government has actually capped it. So government's monitors actually doesn't tell you. It's designed not to tell you readings beyond 500. But I think it's very, very important for Gen Zs, for people, for citizens to understand that it's not just the winter that is polluted, it's a perennial pollution crisis that India is facing and Delhi specifically is facing, just that it is more, there's more inconvenience and there's more visible inconvenience in the winter months.
So we spoke to some people and they were saying that they did not feel an instant change with the AQI levels being bad. So can you tell the difference between instant impact and like a long-term
So,
damage?
a lot of times people say that air pollution is slow poison. It's not as if you breathe 400 AQI air or 600 AQI air and collapse next moment. Slow poison, in the sense, if you look at what the doctors have been telling us, the long-term health impact that it actually has on people. Several studies that talk about, of course, so therefore there is mortality. Indeed, there's mortality, but there's no immediate mortality in most cases. Lancet says that 1.5 million people die each year because of air pollution. Lung Care Foundation talks about how every third child in Delhi NCR has some sort of a pulmonological disorder, a breathing disorder, or asthma in that sense. University of Chicago report talks about how if you live in Delhi NCR, you're actually losing 10 to 12 years of your time in terms of life expectancy. So, of course, it's not something, it's not as if you start bleeding because of a particular air, but the long-term impact that this has. So there's this year, people have actually, the doctors have come forward and said that it's not just breathing disorder, there's arthritis, there's damage to your nervous system, there's damage to your skin, to your eyes, to your brain, every part of your body. Because, when I told you that PM 2.5 is 30 to 40 times smaller than human hair, then it's not just your lungs, it's your entire bloodstream that is actually getting, polluted in that sense.
Yeah, so we did interview some people and they had said that they had been feeling, their eyes were burning, they had got throat symptoms of throat pain and things like that. So that's all due to the pollution.
Absolutely. As I lost my voice around like 20 days ago, and then I was traveling. I have not got it back. I still have 10% irritation in my throat. Of course, I was traveling and therefore slightly better. So indeed, most households now, imagine like you have a sofa and a TV and a refrigerator, you also have a nebulizer in homes with children. And the worst part is that air pollution actually disproportionately affects the children and the elderly. And imagine if you already have a comorbidity or you have a precondition. So if you already are asthmatic, you already have a heart ailment or a breathing ailment, imagine the situation becomes worse. So when we talk about immediate air quality impact, if you look at ICUs of most of the hospitals, there are people who already had a precondition, and then a AQI of 500, 600 makes your situation worse. But also the thing is that, a lot of times when we talk about mortality, no death certificate actually says that you died because of air pollution. So you die because of a heart attack, you die because of other ailments, which is triggered because of immediate consumption of that bad air or sustained periodic over years consumption or breathing of bad air, and therefore you almost normalize that condition in that sense.
Yeah, so I think people have normalized.
Absolutely. As we think that, air is better today, but, reading says that it's 300. So improvement in air quality is that, oh, wow, we are only very poor. And very poor is normal. Imagine Zurich and many other parts of the world. Even in Bangkok, for that matter, 200 AQI means lockdown, shutdown, action taken. And here we are, as if 500 is Changasi. It's business as usual.
So, can you tell us one hack that we can use in our daily life to prevent damage?
In the sense, this is a public health issue. Of course, you can perhaps hack-wise, you can fix your air, you can not step outside.
Masks or air purifiers?
Of course, as in one should wear mask, as in it marginally helps you if you're outdoors. One of the things that you should do is, avoid physical activity. Don't be so brave. Just because you're not falling down, collapsing when you're, running, in the park, that does not mean it's not affecting you. The only thing is that if you can afford to avoid exposure to bad air. But again, as in it's such a rich man's or rich woman's prescription that work from home, don't step out. How will a traffic cop or a rickshawala, or for that matter, imagine a vegetable seller work from home? That luxury is not with a daily wage worker or a laborer or a street vendor in that sense. So again, as rich people, as people with privilege, we can work from home, we can perhaps have air purifiers, we can have 20 nebulizers in different corners of our homes, but that's not a solution. I always say that we cannot have private solution to public problem. Of course, avoid exposure, but that's the only thing that you can do.
So nowadays, many people are suggesting and giving advice to go out and go for a run to help their lungs battle the AQI.
Yeah, but in good air you should run, not in bad air. As in, drinking water is good, but drinking toxic water is not good. And when you know that more air that you take, and that's what cardio activity does, imagine more 800 AQI air that you're taking, and therefore you're actually taking more toxins in the process. So in your head, it tells you that you're actually helping your heart and your body and your health, but reality is that you're actually going closer to taking more toxic air in your body.
So can we talk about Beijing and how they help their air quality?
So Beijing also had a similar air quality crisis in the sense, in terms of, they were also one of the most polluted capitals of the world. One of the first things that Beijing did is accepted this as a problem and also did not do data fudging. Data fudging that we see in India, we turn off our air quality monitors, sprinkle water on air quality monitors. One of the first things that Beijing did is really made its pollution monitoring and analysis extremely efficient, extremely dense. And of course, before really looking at that entire data work, they actually allocated adequate resources. So if you look at the pollution budget that India has through this entire clean air program, it is around 20,000 crores for 120 cities over 6 years, which comes to an average of 25 crores per year per city in that sense, on an average. And of course, majority of that based on RTI, that's also unspent in that sense. Versus what Beijing did is actually put in almost 15,000 crores each year for almost a decade to clean its air. So, one is to really have that political will to allocate adequate resources and do real pollution inventory mitigation. So one of the things that Beijing also identified is that vehicular pollution was one of the main causes of air pollution, and therefore what it did is it made its public transport regime affordable, last mile, first mile, and widespread. So investing in public transport. The other thing that they looked at is coal thermal power plants and polluting industries, because that's where your PM 2.5 comes from. Also in that sense, a lot of sulfur dioxide and particulate matter 2.5, both from vehicles and from your industries and coal thermal power plants. It actually moved out these polluting industries and coal thermal power plants outside the immediate periphery of the city, and also followed the emission standards, the norms of FGDs, of sulfur dioxide emission standards of coal thermal power plants. Construction and demolition activities, because dust was another factor there. So, if you look at the case study of Beijing in terms of what polluted Beijing is almost very, very similar to what pollutes New Delhi or Delhi NCR. And this is what they did. And now imagine they were able to turn it around. So accepting a problem, analyzing a problem, not looking at it from an image point of view, but from the lens of health. So, great image in terms of, fudging data, but reality is if your lungs are crying for help, that doesn't help. So political will, long-term planning, structural systemic changes, really looking at, not prioritizing economic activity alone, as in Beijing and China in that sense are also emerging economies, or were emerging economy then as well. And for them also economic indicators were very, very important. But they realized that GDP is only one part. As in, if you have an ailing and a dying population, where does it actually help? So if you look at the World Bank report vis-a-vis India's study and impact of pollution on overall GDP, the loss to GDP because of air pollution alone in India is somewhere around 2% to 3%. So, and a lot of times I say that the cost of inaction is higher than cost of action. As in, if you look at just that loss to GDP, if you just invest that money in air pollution mitigation, and also another thing, as in, right now you and I have been only talking about Delhi NCR.
Yes.
And that's another, damage that we are actually doing to air pollution conversation. Most of our air pollution conversation, unfortunately, has become so Delhi-centric, where we forget that almost 60 to 70% of India's air is actually poor, very poor, severe, or severe plus. In fact, if you look at the data of some of the 10 most polluted cities of India, most of them are not are beyond the immediate periphery of Delhi. So we need to have an India-centric approach, a pan-India approach, a perennial approach, a 365-day approach, and a systemic approach to solving air pollution crisis rather than symptoms, rather than sprinkling water and settling dust and this entire pretending to be doing something rather than actually systemically doing something. That is what is missing right now.
So my next question is about the Aravalli Hills decision, that there's been a recent Supreme Court judgment accepting a new definition of the Aravalli Hills, and today is another judgment. So can we talk about?
So, imagine we're having this conversation. AQI, as per government standards, government monitors is 400, private monitors are telling you 600, 700, 800. And almost we're all helpless. The only thing that perhaps provides us some sort of, controls the air quality or is a natural ecological barrier in terms of dust is this Aravalli range. And what the government has done in terms of proposed to the Supreme Court, and unfortunately Supreme Court accepted it, is the new definition of Aravallis. We need to understand that Aravallis is almost several billion years old. It's almost like a 700-kilometer mountain range, starting from Gujarat in that sense and ends in Delhi. Is the only natural dust barrier that we actually have between Thar and Indo-Gangetic Plain. Now, based on this new definition, first of all, why do we need to redefine our ecological resources? Why that urgency to call something a mountain one day and not the other day? Because the same definition was actually rejected by the Honorable Supreme Court in 2010 in terms of that 100-meter threshold. So the new definition that the government proposed and Supreme Court accepted, therefore, any mountain range which is only 100 meters tall will qualify to be Aravallis, and the rest is open for mining, which by definition, if you look at this 1.5 lakh square kilometer area of Aravalli, almost 90% of Aravalli is therefore expendable, as in it's open for mining activity. And to begin with, it will be mining activity, and then later it will also be real estate and other things in that sense. So that's what is very unfortunate. It's our dust barrier. It is something that provides us entire water sufficiency. This Aravalli is almost like a soaking ground for our water recharge, both surface water as well as underground water. The climate and the temperature barrier between Thar and this area is the Aravalli. So we talk about climate, we talk about dust, we talk about air quality, we talk about water sufficiency and water sovereignty. All of that gets compromised primarily for an economic activity called mining, and to greenwash it, what the Supreme Court has called for and allowed is sustainable mining, as it's an oxymoron. How can slaughtering a human being be non-violent, and how can mining or blasting of the Aravallis be suddenly called sustainable in that sense? I'm very, very hopeful that the Supreme Court today, suo motu, has taken cognizance of this issue because of the outrage from ground up, and is looking at redefining or at going through this entire redefinition process, and hope it rolls back its previous order in that sense.
So, do you think environmental damage is the price of development that they are calling for?
Absolutely. A lot of times, this entire monkey balancing conversation that we end up doing in terms of, development and environment needs to go hand in hand. Yes, development is extremely important, but development at what cost and whose cost is extremely important. So we all want broader roads, but if creation of broader roads are at the cost of your forest, and cutting down at that forest is making your life a hell, your breathing difficult, and your lifespan shorter by 10 years, is that what you want? So you have a fancy mall and a great infrastructure, 24-hour electricity supply, but your life expectancy is down by 10 years. What do you do? And therefore, that balancing is extremely important. Look at what's been happening in Himalayas. So India, unfortunately, almost has an ecological disaster calendar. This year, for almost 3 months, I was all across television channels shouting about the crisis that was there in the Himalayas. Before that, we were talking about heat wave. Now, for last 2-3 months, we're talking about air pollution. So, Imagine this entire pattern of calendar of disaster needs to break, and development cannot be at the cost of our public environment and public health. And by the way, this is not romance for environment that people like us keep talking about, save the Aravallis or save our air and save our Yamuna and so on and so forth. It has direct linkage with our health. So it's not a romantic environmental problem that you and I are discussing today. It's the health problem, for heaven's sake, that we're discussing today and we'll discuss tomorrow.
Is there still hope for change? Is there any scope that Delhi air quality or India's air quality can change over time?
There's no other option but to hope. I wish there was an alternative to breathing, that I could tell your viewers that, breathing has become very, very toxic and therefore let's do something else till the time air doesn't improve. Unfortunately, there's no alternative to breathing and there's no alternative to hope because it has to change, it will change. Things have changed in this country, on this planet, when people ask for that cleaner air. It's your fundamental right. Breathing is something as fundamental as breathing is made challenging by our several dispensations over decades, and therefore that has to change. We cannot, as I again reiterate, we cannot look for private solution for public problem. Gen Zs, young people, all the citizens will have to demand for cleaner air. Before you demand, a better economy, demand cleaner environment and cleaner health.
So before we close, I just wanted to ask you, for the viewers watching, could you give one message on how to deal with the air quality in Delhi right now?
Rise up, stand up, speak up. Don't really just think that you can buy an air purifier. You might perhaps buy an air purifier. Majority of people can't. It's your moral responsibility. People like us with agency who can anyway buy an air purifier or perhaps buy cleaner air or perhaps run away to Switzerland or to Manali or to Goa. That's not a solution. We will have to, as a country, as a civilization, find long-term solutions. So my message to everyone is rise up, stand up, ask and demand cleaner air. That's the only solution.
Thank you so much for breaking this down so simply and honestly. And for all the viewers watching, I hope you discuss this with a friend and help the air quality by making small changes in your daily life.